Hello everyone, how are you? Today we're gonna model and animate all these sofas and armchairs.
You can also transfer the animation techniques that I'll be showing you today to other types of objects, and remember, this video is part of my isometric room animation series, link to the playlist in the description. Okay, let's begin. First, we're gonna model and animate this armchair.
To create this sofa chair, let's start with a cube. In edit mode, scale it down. Now scale it down on the z-axis and add a subdivision modifier. Add a loop cut and escape to place it in the middle, and add another one. Escape, select the top vertex and move up on the z-axis. A to select all and scale on the z-axis. Select the top vertex again, enable proportional editing, and move up on the z-axis again. Now select the bottom vertex and move up on the z-axis and back to object mode, shade smooth. Let's add another cube for the feet. In edit mode, disable proportional editing and scale it down. Scale it down on the z-axis and move it down. Scale it a bit more and scale it on the z-axis again. Add a loop cut, escape, bevel. Add another loop cut, escape, and bevel. In face mode, select these faces and extrude. Change the origin point to individual origins and scale a bit. Let's move it up to make the legs shorter. And now enable X-ray mode, select the middle top and the middle bottom face and delete. Go to edge mode. Select these two faces and F to fill. Now select these three faces and F to fill. And let's repeat. And now select this edge loop and fill. Back to object mode, let's add a bevel modifier and shade smooth. Let's move this pillow down, duplicate it and rotate it 90 degrees on the y-axis and place it at the back of the sofa. And now let's scale and move the pillows until you are happy with the proportions. Remember, you can model any other type of sofa or furniture and follow only the animation part of this tutorial. Select all the meshes and change the pivot point to median point and place the object wherever you like to. This is gonna be the final position for the animation. Let's put the final touches and scale it a bit. Now select the bottom pillow, Shift S cursor to selected, and add an empty. Let's scale it down and place it. We're gonna use this empty to control the entire sofa, so we don't need to create a keyframe for every mesh. Select the sofa, and then select the empty, Ctrl P and set parent to object. And now if we move the empty, everything moves. Let's change the end frame to 60. And in frame 45, add a location keyframe for the z-axis. In frame 25, move on the z-axis and set a keyframe. Now we're gonna animate the rotation on the z-axis. Let's escape. So we need a rotation keyframe for the z-axis only. And in frame 1, rotate minus 160 degrees on the z-axis and set a keyframe. Now move it down on the z-axis and set a location keyframe for that axis only. Okay, so here we have the basis for our effect. We could add some changes, like for example changing the rotation to 360 degrees. Let's replace this keyframe and see how now the sofa swerves all the way. We could even change it to minus 360 degrees and now the sofa swerves to the opposite side. I'm gonna set it back to minus 160 though. Another thing we could add is a bit of a bounce effect. Let's open up this channels group, lock the rotation channel, select these two keyframes and set the interpolation mode to back. Let's see. Let's try setting the interpolation to bounce instead. And another thing we could do is animate the scale. Let's unlock this channel. In frame 25, set a scale keyframe, and in frame 1, scale to 0 and set a scale keyframe. Let's see. And now we also have a scaling animation. Let's hide the floor to see the animation a bit better. And now let's see each keyframe one by one. Okay, now let's move on to the next one.
Add a cube.
In edit mode, scale it down.
Select the top and the middle face and delete. Select all and subdivide. Select these two faces, move them down, and now select these two edges and move them towards the back a bit. Add a subdivision modifier and shade smooth. To make the mesh thicker, add a solidify modifier. Enable even thickness, let's change the offset to 1.
And move this modifier to the top.
Let's add a bit more thickness. And back to edit mode, select these top edges
and move them up.
Scale them up as well. And select these bottom edges and scale them down. Let's go back to these edges, move them down a bit. And to create the pillow, select these faces, duplicate, escape, and separate by selection.
And back to object mode,
select this new mesh and in edit mode, select all and move up. Scale on the y-axis a bit. Now select these two edges and scale them down on the y-axis. Now in vertex mode, select this middle vertex and move it up a bit. Select all these vertices and move them down a bit. Select all and scale on the y-axis. And let's move it up. In object mode, move it up a bit more and apply the solidify modifier. Now select this bottom middle vertex and move it down. Select these corners and scale them down on the y-axis. And now select the chair's top vertices and move them down. And do the same with these two vertices. Move this middle vertex up, and I want the chair to be a bit thicker. And back to these vertices, scale them down on the y-axis. And move this middle vertex towards the back. Let's increase the subdivisions. And now I'm gonna move this vertex a bit. To create the sofa legs, add a cube, scale it down, select this bottom face and scale it down. Let's scale everything down and apply the scale. Add a bevel modifier, shade smooth, and move this top face. Let's scale everything down a bit, and let's place the leg. Select this bottom face and insert face. And let's do the same with the top face. Once you have the leg placed, add a mirror modifier and select the chair as a mirror object. Choose the X and the Y-axis and move the modifier on top. Let's move the legs on the Y-axis to separate them.
Now let's enable X-ray mode, select the top face and move it up.
And let's move the legs down.
Now select the bottom face and scale it a bit. and move it up a bit.
I'm gonna scale the legs on the Y and the X axis, and now on the Z axis a bit. Let's move it up. Apply the mirror modifier and move the legs a bit more to the center and now up a bit. We finished modeling the armchair,
so now let's animate it.
Add an empty, scale it down and move it down to where the legs are. Now select everything, then add the empty to the selection and parent object. And let's test it. Okay, now let's use the empty to place the armchair. You could have joined the meshes instead of using an empty, but since each mesh has different modifiers and I didn't want to apply them, I used the empty instead. And you could even scale it if you need to. Choose the final frame, set the end frame. I'm gonna place the chair. And we're gonna animate the location on the Z-axis, so let's set a keyframe for that axis only. Go to frame 1, move up and insert a keyframe. Let's see. In frame 2, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. Now you can play with the interpolation and the easing modes. I actually covered this subject more in depth in some of my past videos, and you can even lock some keyframes and ease only a few. I prefer going to the graph editor to tweak the easing mode a bit more precisely. Open up the channel groups, and now we get to see the curve for each axis we've animated.
Let's lock all the channels but the set location channel.
A to select all, and let's change the interpolation to cubic, and now the curve has changed. And the movement has changed as well. Let's go with another option to get some sort of overshoot effect. Let's go back to cubic. And let's assume you decided to try a different easing type, but then you changed your mind and you want to go back to cubic. But as you can see, the curve doesn't look the same way it used to look when we chose cubic at the beginning. And as you can see, the movement is not the same either. So what I found to fix that is to choose automatic easing, and now our curve looks as it looked before, and so does the movement. And since we only created location keyframes on the Z-axis, you can move your object on the X or on the Y-axis and you don't need to set new location keyframes. Okay, let's take it back to our position.
And now let's see each keyframe one by one.
We could also add a squash effect. In the last keyframe, add a scale keyframe on the Z-axis. Move a couple of frames forward, add another keyframe. In between the two keyframes, scale down on the Z-axis and insert a scale keyframe. As you can see, it looks a bit robotic, so to fix that, let's go back to the graph editor. Lock all the channels but the Z scale channel. Select these three keyframes, choose cubic.
Now select these two keyframes and choose Ease Out.
Now select these two keyframes and choose Ease In.
And you should have this shape.
Now let's see the difference.
And now let's see each keyframe in case you want to copy the values. Okay, now let's move on onto this beanbag sofa. Let's start with a sphere.
Shade smooth, and in edit mode enable proportional editing. Select this top vertex and move down on the Z-axis. Remember, you can control the influence with the mouse wheel or with the beige up and beige down keys. Now select this top vertex
and rotate to get this shape.
And move up on the Z-axis. Let's go back to object mode and let's move it up a bit and back to edit mode. Select this back vertex and move it.
Decrease the influence a bit to get this shape at the back.
And now move a bit to the inside.
Select this front vertex and move down on the Z-axis.
In object mode, scale it down and origin to geometry.
Let's place it on top of the floor, scale it a bit more,
and move it to the side. Let's go to camera view and I'm gonna finish placing this sofa. If you find the modeling process a bit hard, there are other tutorials on YouTube on how to make this type of sofa.
Okay, back to edit mode.
Select this middle vertex again and move down on the Z-axis. Let's enable overlays and now select this top vertex and move it on the Z-axis. And now move on the Y-axis to the back a bit. Now let's go back to this middle vertex and move on the Y-axis. Select this edge loop and move it up on the Z-axis to get this inflated look. And now select this edge loop and move it up on the Z-axis. Let's enable X-ray mode, and inside view select these bottom vertices and delete. Now select this edge loop, disable proportional editing and scale to 0 on the Z-axis. F to fill, inset face and inset another face.
Let's disable X-ray mode and enable the proportional editing tool. Select this top vertex and move on the Y-axis.
Now select this edge loop and scale to make this sofa a bit rounder. Select this edge loop and scale it up. And now let's repeat with this bottom edge loop. Scale up. Change the fall-off to sphere and move this top vertex up on the Z-axis. Let's play with the influence a bit. Set the fall-off to smooth again. Select this bottom edge loop and move it down on the Z-axis.
Let's go to side view and rotate. Back to object mode, add a subdivision modifier.
And scale it a bit more. Okay, now we can animate this sofa. Let's go to frame 30. And we're gonna animate the Y-axis and the Z-axis, so let's set a keyframe for the Z and the Y-axis. This is gonna be the final position. In frame 1, move it up on the Z-axis, and now move it on the Y-axis. And set a keyframe for both axes. Let's see.
Let's go back to the first keyframe and I'm gonna move the object off screen. And set a new keyframe.
Let's take a look. Okay, here we have our animation. It looks decent, but we could add a few more things. First, we're gonna animate the rotation on the Z-axis. In the final keyframe, set a rotation keyframe for the Z-axis, and in frame 1, rotate 360 degrees and set a keyframe. Let's see. We could also animate the rotation on the X-axis. So in frame 34, set a rotation keyframe for the X-axis, and in frame 30, rotate a bit towards the back on the X-axis and set a keyframe. Let's take a look. And now it looks as if the sofa touches the wall and falls back into place. Let's move this keyframe and lock all the channels but the X-axis channel. Move this rotation keyframe we had in frame 30, and now the motion is way more subtle than it was before, but I think it's too subtle though, so let's move the keyframes a bit closer to the other rotation keyframe, and now it is a bit more noticeable. Let's try a different placement, and I like this one better. Now lock all the channels but the set location channel,
and move these keyframes to frame 22.
Now the sofa touches the floor a bit sooner than in our previous animation. Now we can ease the animation a bit, so let's go to the graph editor, open up this channels group, select the Y location channel, select this keyframe
and stretch this handle to decelerate the movement. And now let's see each keyframe one by one. Let's move on to the last animation of the day. To create this chair, let's start with a cube. In edit mode, scale it down and scale it down on the Z-axis. Scale it up a bit and back to object mode, add a bevel modifier. And now add a subdivision surface modifier. Shade smooth, and I'm gonna tweak the bevel modifier a bit. Okay, now duplicate and escape, and in edit mode select this back face, Shift S cursor to selected and back to object mode, origin to 3D cursor. And now we can rotate it -90 degrees on the Y-axis from this pivot point and scale it on the X-axis. Let's rotate it a bit more and let's place both cubes. Let's rotate this one a bit more, and back to edit mode, add a loop cut. Escape and add another one and escape. In vertex mode, select this middle vertex, enable proportional editing and move up on the Z-axis. And now let's enable X-ray mode and select this bottom vertex and move it down on the Z-axis a bit. Now back to object mode, add a cube, and in edit mode, disable proportional editing and scale it down. Now scale it down on the Z-axis and scale it down on the Y-axis. Let's move it on the Y-axis and place it. Back to object mode, duplicate and escape. Let's hide this duplicate and in edit mode, scale it on the Z-axis. Let's show the other mesh to see where to place our selected object. And try to match the angle of the top cushion. Scale it down a bit on the Y-axis, and back to object mode, duplicate this one again, escape, and in edit mode, rotate it on the Y-axis and move it down. Let's place it, and scale it a bit more on the Y-axis. Select this face and let's drag it. Let's go back to this one and scale it on the Y-axis a bit more so it's a bit thinner. And back to this one, scale it up on the Y-axis. Back to object mode, duplicate and escape. And in edit mode, select all and place it. Scale it down on the Y-axis. Select the bottom face and move it up a bit. Back to object mode, place the pillows closer to the chair legs. Since I want this pillow to be a bit shorter, let's move these faces in edit mode. And now add a bevel modifier to this mesh. Shade smooth, add a mirror modifier, and set this pillow as the mirror object. Now let's select the other sofa legs, select this one at last, press Ctrl L and copy modifiers. Let's select these two meshes and let's go to edit mode. In front view, select this bottom face and move it up a bit. Now move this face up a bit. Now select these two front vertices and move them down on the Z-axis so the base is straight, and now do the same with this mesh. Move it down on the Z-axis and move it on the X-axis, and move these vertices a bit. Back to object mode, select the entire sofa and place it. Scale it down a bit. I want this one to be a bit shorter, so Shift and press X 2 times to move it on the local X axis. And now select all and scale it on the local Y axis. And let's move this face on the local X axis and move everything down a bit. Move these bottom vertices up. And move these top vertices on the Y axis. And move them on the local X axis. In edit mode, I'm gonna rotate this one a bit. And now select this mesh, and in edit mode, select this vertex, Shift S, cursor to selected, and let's add an empty. Scale it down. And I copied this rotation value and paste it to the empty. And now select the sofa, select the empty, Ctrl P and parent to object. Let's test it, and now let's choose the rotation tool and set the transform orientation to local so it's easier to see which axis to rotate. In frame 20, set a rotation keyframe, and in frame 1, rotate on the local Y axis and set a rotation keyframe. Let's take a look. I'm gonna move the keyframes a couple of frames. To animate the sofa legs, add 2 shape keys, and in edit mode, select this face and move it down. And back to object mode, let's try it out. Okay, now let's create shape keys for the other meshes. Add 2 shape keys, and again in edit mode, select this face and move it. And repeat one more time. Add 2 shape keys, and again in edit mode, select this face and move this face down. Let's see. And one last time. Add 2 shape keys, enable X-ray mode and move this face up. Let's test it. Okay, now let's start animating all the shape keys we've created. Go to frame 25 and set a keyframe. In frame none, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. And in the same frame, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and set a keyframe. Let's take a look. Okay, now let's repeat with the other meshes. Let's go with this one. Go to frame 12, set a keyframe, and now go to frame 6. Set the value to 1 and insert a keyframe. And now set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a keyframe. And let's repeat the process, this time in frame 31, set a keyframe, and in frame 17, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. Set a scale keyframe, and one frame before, scale to 0 and insert a keyframe. It took me a while to choose where to place each keyframe. Here, of course, I'm not showing you that messy part of my process. Let's take a look. You could also create this effect using geometry nodes, but I feel like shape keys are a pretty simple, straightforward technique. Okay, now let's animate these pillows. And I'm still with the transform orientation set to local. In frame 21, set a rotation keyframe, and in frame 1, rotate it. Oh wait, let's undo this. First, go to edit mode, select this vertex, Shift S, cursor to selected, and back to object mode, origin to 3D cursor. And now we can rotate it from this origin point and set a rotation keyframe. Let's see. Okay, now let's go with this one. In frame 21, set a rotation keyframe, and in frame 8, rotate and set a rotation keyframe. Let's take a look. Now let's add 2 shape keys, and in edit mode, select the top face and move down. And now select the bottom pillow, add 2 shape keys, select these faces, move them, and now enable X-ray mode, so you can select all these faces and move them again. Back to object mode, first move all these rotation keyframes, and now go to frame 14, set a keyframe for this shape key, and now in frame 6, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. Now set a scale keyframe, and one frame before that one, scale to 0 and insert a scale keyframe. Let's see. Okay, now let's go with the other pillow. First, I wanna move the rotation keyframes. Again, it took me a while to figure out where to put each keyframe. In frame 12, set the value to 1 and set a keyframe. And in frame 21, set the value to 0 and set a keyframe. And now back to frame 12, set a scale keyframe, and one frame before that one, scale to 0 and set a keyframe. Let's see. Okay, here we have our effect, but let's see it keyframe by keyframe. And like I said, you can follow this tutorial for animating other types of objects. And if you liked this video, I'm sure you're gonna enjoy this tutorial. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!